Evening,
Vincent,
sir.
how are you?
I'm good.
Excellent. I don't know. Sorry about that. I don't know what happened.
No problem. I thought I would be the one rushing tonight, but I felt better when it was said that it would be you tonight. A bit of background about myself. So just so you know, I have
Yeah.
worked with the government at a sensitive level for about 13 years. So I've had the privilege, I'll call it, to be able to see things not only from your side of the bench, having seen what would we call it, the 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 evidence that is not disclosed. You understand the
Mhm.
envelope stuff that some might not be privy to. So I've had to see it from there. I've also had the privilege of attending the Old Bailey recently, and that was a total different experience for me going there because not just the whole layout of the court is different to Crown Court and everything else, and just the way that the whole setup is gives it a different feel. So for me, I saw your video that you put out, and immediately I looked at it. I said, you know what? I've never seen a video like this before. It was straight to the point. It said what it needed to say, and it was for the right person. It will be heartfelt. You understand? Because a lot of the time, the only time you do see barristers is when you're actually in trouble or you're trying to get a barrister, hopefully, to, because what is it now, a KC instead of a
Yeah.
QC? Yeah,
Mhm.
to represent a family member. So, what I wanted to ask you, just to start off so the people understand, is just briefly describe your role as a criminal barrister and what types of cases you handle.
Okay, Gwenton. So my role as a criminal barrister is to defend people who are charged with criminal offences. And obviously, the more senior you get, the more serious the offences. So I started off doing ordinary criminal offences. You know, it could be motoring offences, it could be drink-related offences or theft, robbery cases. But then, as you become more senior, you get involved in things such as murder, violent disorder, drug offences, conspiracy cases, fraud cases, and so those are the type of cases that I do now, where the penalties are far more severe. And really, it's just representing people from the time you're instructed by a solicitor to take the case on, all the way through sometimes to their appeal, if they're able to appeal a conviction. Hopefully, the plan as a defense lawyer is to secure the acquittal of your client, but that doesn't always happen.
Yeah. And so, before we even get into that, what motivated you to pursue a career in criminal law?
Well, funny, it started off many, many years ago as a schoolboy who used to go home at lunchtime, as we could then. And I used to watch a program called Crown Court that used to be on at lunchtimes. And it was a program based on a courtroom setting with the judges, barristers, and defendants. But of course, in those days, talking about the early 70s or mid 70s, there were no black barristers on TV. So
Okay.
the person who was depicted as the defendant was invariably black. But I wasn't so much interested in that. I was just taken in by the arguments, the courtroom drama, the way people dressed, the way people spoke. And then I got really fascinated about murder cases. And, you know, first of all, why did people do such things? And what happened in the court cases, especially the ones at the Old Bailey?
So, from your perspective, then, what are the most challenging aspects of defending individuals accused of serious crime, as you are dealing with now?
Well, you said it. I mean, first of all, there's this perception, even amongst the public, that if you're accused of something, you must have done it. So, you know, you have to deal with that to start with, representing someone that you start on the back foot, that there's a perception that, well, you wouldn't be in court if you hadn't done anything wrong. But of course, our system means that you're innocent until proven guilty. So the challenges are, dealing with different difficult aspects of the case in terms of the evidence, getting an explanation for why something is not as one sees it. There may be an explanation for it, and ensuring that you run a defense which is credible for your
Yeah.
client.
So let's say then you've got a guilty client, you know they're guilty. How do you keep that objective without being biased and feeling as if you're doing the right thing, getting the guilty person off?
Well, I think you've got to approach it from the stance that, first of all, your own opinions don't matter, in the sense that, yes, you can look at a case and think, well, the evidence is overwhelming. But what
Yeah.
you then do is say to them, look, I'm advising you on the evidence that the evidence is overwhelming. And my advice to you is to plead guilty. But if they then persist in saying they're not guilty, then your duty is to defend them, unless there comes a situation where they tell you that they're guilty. Then, of course, you're professionally bound to walk away. You can't defend someone where they said, look, I'm guilty, but you need to get me off, which is what a lot of people think happens. It doesn't happen
Yeah.
that way. So
So,
basically, you run the defense, but if the evidence is overwhelming and you give them that advice, hopefully they take your advice as a professional.
have you ever had a client wanting to attack you after being found guilty?
Yeah, oh yeah, not that often, but it has happened. I think
Okay.
when I was very junior, you had some defendants who were found guilty and they weren't best pleased, but it very rarely happens.
Okay. And with what's some of the common misconceptions with the criminal justice system that you frequently encounter?
Um, that the system's biased, because people, have to understand, with the criminal trial, it's a jury trial. So there are 12 people who've never met you, never met the barristers, never met the judge, and the vetting procedure for selection of a jury is quite rigorous.
Yeah.
And so, the suggestion that the jury are in bed or in league with the judge and the barristers are all in it together, that's not true. So you have to dispense with that rumor that the system is rigged against you. Um, if the evidence that's been obtained has been done poorly, it's the job of the barrister to exploit that. Or if there's something not right about the case, it's the job of the barrister defending to exploit that. And of course, where judges are supposed to not show any bias, even if they have an opinion, they're not supposed to really intervene in that way, because they're really there as a referee to make sure the
Yeah.
case runs fairly.
Yeah. I'm watching one now in America where a rapper's said to have killed his two friends from inside the car, and this was one of the reasons why I wanted you on, because we don't see a lot of senior barristers like yourself that have done over 3 decades of practice actually coming back and sharing the knowledge with other individuals. I studied at Burbage University for 1 year and then went working with the Secret Service instead of continuing with law.
Mhm.
And the reason for that was because I've spent some time on the other side of the fence in my young time. I have got a mark on my DBS, which I was told soon as I attended the university that you'll never be able to sit on the bar, so forget about it.
Mm.
So that's something that people need to understand, that just one offense could prevent you from your dream job, to be honest. And there's a lot of people out there that would have been amazing barristers, but because of one mistake that they made as a youth, that they might, and this is another thing that people tell young people, that don't worry about what you do before you're 18. It all disappears and you could continue with your life. When that isn't really true, because that then prevents you from doing jobs like yours or other jobs where you need a senior vetting for, because you're then seen as a risk. So if we were saying, how do you prepare for trial, and what are some of the strategies that you use to get your clients prepared?
Well, there can be nothing better than good preparation. So that is the key. You cannot be too prepared. You can't be over. It's better to be over prepared, if you like. So it's just knowing your case, inside out, thinking like the other side thinks. So when you're defending, I often say to people, you've got to think like the prosecutor would think, so
Yes.
that you can deal with a lot of the difficult points of your case. Because if you can deal with those, then it's going to be far easier to advance your defense. But if you just think in a vacuum of, oh, I'm just thinking about my case as a defendant or defending, then you're not ready to meet with the challenges that the prosecution are going to ask you about. So a lot of it's just really in the preparation, over preparing. There's nothing wrong with that, because when you know your case inside out, you know all the pitfalls and you're ready to deal with them.
And also about something that I learned is this half-time argument, where you then keep some stuff up your sleeve for half time. So let's say then they've brought you to court on a perverting the cause charge, but really when you've gone through the paperwork, you can see there's no perverting the cause here, but you keep quiet until the halfway mark and then you then raise it. I've seen that happen a few times. Is that a strategy that you've used before, where you know that the charge might have to get amended along the way, but you try and keep it quiet so the prosecution don't find out?
Yeah, there are different strategies. Sometimes you try and head things off at the very start of a case, where you make what we call an application to dismiss, where you
Yes.
say there are no charges. But in doing that, sometimes you reveal what your case is too
Okay.
early. So the next point of doing that is at the halfway stage, at the end of the prosecution's case, where you're able to stand up and say that no jury could convict on this evidence and the case should not proceed because there is no case to answer. And sometimes, if the circumstances are right and the evidence is not there, judges have no choice but to stop the case at the halfway point.
And for one
Yeah.
of the things that I've learned, and I wanted to ask you from I knew we were going to do this interview, is when you ask a client to provide a defense statement and that is then shared with the prosecution, does that then arm the prosecution with an attack strategy?
Only if you depart from what you say in it. I mean, that's why a defense statement is very important, because it sets out what your defense is to the case. And so you're duty bound to serve a defense statement, although in some argue that you don't have to, but um, that has implications if you don't serve one. But when you do serve one, you're supposed to set out in full, as best you can, what the issues are in the case and what your defense is. But in some cases, defendants change their mind or change their account, and there is an ability for the prosecution then to use that defense statement against you.
So what if the evidence that comes in, let's say then there was a murder or attempted murder, and there is no way of placing you at the scene? Do you still go along and admit that you was there, even though there's no evidence, cell site, CCTV, witnesses, nothing at all could place you at that scene? Now you're gonna then put in a defense statement to say you were there. Isn't that admitting guilt without the evidence actually placing you at scene?
Well, I'd be really worried if they had none of that evidence and they were still charging you with murder. You're not at the scene. There's nothing that puts you at the scene.
Yeah,
There's no mobile telephone evidence or any type of evidence that puts you there. I'd be surprised how the charge would get off the ground.
yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so when you're considering taking a case, what do you think of? Do you ever reject a case, like a case comes to you and you're like, no, this isn't for me?
Well, technically, as you may know, Gwenton, we're not supposed to turn cases down because of
Yes,
what we call
yeah,
the cab rank rule. But what really happens is that you get known for doing particular types of cases. Some barristers are really good with sexual offences cases. Some of them are very good at murder cases.
yes,
And you get a reputation for doing certain kinds of work, which then informs the amount of cases you get from a particular solicitor. And
yeah.
so they know that you're not really someone known for doing sex cases. But generally, barristers do an array of cases, whatever's given to them. And then maybe later on, as you become more senior, you get to tell your clerks that you're not really wanting to do particular types of work,
Yeah.
and they'll steer that towards somebody else.
Yeah, then that is something that I've seen where I will refer a client to a firm, and then the solicitors will say, "We're waiting for this barrister to be free." So this barrister's the one we will try and push, so we get this barrister because this barrister is good at these cases. So that
Mm.
is something that I have seen. So what improvements do you think there needs to be in the criminal justice system with the way it is now?
Um, well, we need to perhaps become more efficient in the way in which we use court time and cases. As you know, there's a huge backlog. Not really the criminal justice system's fault, because we had COVID, which set us back. But even before COVID, there was a backlog.
Yeah.
Um, Sadly, as a result of that, a lot of criminal barristers left the profession. So we're even under more pressure now with the backlog that we've got. There's a lack of prosecutors. I know that for a fact. So we need to have perhaps more recruitment in the field of criminal law. I know we've had a pay rise recently after many years of not receiving one, but if you're going to attract the best talent to do the most serious cases and serious work in the profession, you need to provide um, a system where good barristers are coming through,
Yeah.
are being trained from all different diversities as well. We need a more diverse judiciary. I mean, still in um, 2023, there are only a handful of Black and Asian judges. That needs to change. There are more women, but we're still deficient in terms of ethnic diversity. So we need to do more about that. And we just need, as I say, to be as efficient as we can in terms of our use of court space, technology, time. And I think when all those things align, then we'll have a criminal justice system that works much better than it does now. I'm a firm fan of having the jury system stay. I wouldn't want to see a system where criminal cases are tried by judges alone
No.
across the board. I think there are some cases where perhaps judges should deal with it on their own. But for most of the criminal offences, I think we should retain the jury system.
I think again we look at the interest in people within the community actually taking up law as a career, and probably you're now the second most famous barrister in the country after Courtney, and the only reason why so we need to understand that a lot of the time people might not see this as an attractive a job because they might not see someone like yourself come back to the grassroots and take your time out to explain the process. And even again, the next question I wanted to ask you is,
Mm.
because you're human, and this is something else people don't understand about barristers, and it's how do you handle the emotional toll dealing with serious criminal cases? How do you deal with that?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I'm asked that question quite a lot. And many people have different ways of releasing the tension, because sometimes it is very stressful, it's very emotional, and draining. But for me personally, I try and switch off as much as I can when I'm not in the courtroom.
Yeah.
But it's good to have a pastime, and my pastime and passion is being outside, and also music. I love live music, so whenever I can get along to a jazz concert or any
Mhm.
kind of live music, I'm there.
And this is it again. It's like you, with the job you're doing, you are having to remind yourself that you're at work because again you're dealing with some of the most dangerous people on earth, not just in the UK, because no matter where those people go, they some of them will be dangerous. So the fact that you get someone off knowing deep down that 9 out of 10 that person was guilty, it's then, do you then hope that the person actually takes that second chance in life, or do you just think, I've done my job and I'll move on?
No, it's definitely that. I hope that, look, we're all human and we're all capable of making mistakes, some more serious than others. And I work on the basis that, but for the grace of God, I could have gone down a different route. Life sometimes throws us curveballs, which we deal with in different ways. But my hope is that whenever I've represented someone, especially a young person who's made a mistake, if they're able to be rehabilitated and to really change and to never make that mistake again, that's always my hope, because I think everybody deserves at least one chance in life to make up for their wrongdoing.
Yeah, that's true. And my nan's 87 in September, and her thing is similar to yours. She says everyone's allowed one mistake in life.
Mm,
Yeah.
mm,
But
yeah.
so what are some of the key skills and qualities that you would give to an aspiring barrister coming up? Because you're a veteran in this game now. So someone coming straight out of the ranks, what are some of the skills and qualities that you would tell them to have?
Um, I think you've got to be passionate about what you want to do. You've got to really want to do it. You've got to be hungry for knowledge to know more about the vocation you've chosen. In this case, law. You can't be a shrinking violet, so you've got to be ready to be able to articulate yourself well, to be able to express your thoughts clearly, to be someone um, who can see beyond what's immediately in front of them. And so by that I mean you have the ability to see 4 or 5 steps down the line, a bit like a chess game. So
Yeah.
you're not just planning your next step, you're planning the next 4 or 5. So you've got to be intuitive. You've got to be someone who's has a good ear to listen. You've got to be someone who is able to um, show empathy, but also be forthright. Someone who's prepared to stand their corner, someone who's prepared to give way when you haven't got a strong point, someone who's gracious, and um, someone who's just keen to help people sometimes who are not so fortunate in life, because a lot of the people you do represent in the criminal justice system do have a lot of baggage. And I don't mean that disrespectfully. I just mean that there are a lot of things in the background. So I think, if you choose to defend, you have to have certain qualities that makes you not only an effective advocate in the courtroom, but someone who is also able to show empathy. In fact, someone said to me the other day, sometimes barristers, particularly defense barristers, are also like social workers.
Yes. Yeah, you are. And one of the things that I think as well is being humble,
Yeah,
because
definitely.
you could get to the point where you're winning cases and everyone wants you, and you're because of the case you represented, you end up in the news or wherever. It's hard not to start feeling like a rock star at certain times. And I've seen barristers that even when they walk in the court, they hold their wings out, like
Mm,
like I've arrived. And you're like, oh,
yeah.
you hear defendants saying, "I want that barrister," because the way they've walked into court, it's as if they've already won the case.
Yeah, I mean, you have to have an air of authority about you, an air of confidence, but that has to be tempered with humility. And I'm a big fan of people who are humble, yet they're very, very good at what they do, and they know they're good. But the beauty of who they are is more their humility.
Yeah, one of the things that I would, even though I'm not in the profession, because I work from the other side of the seat, I've attended court cases where I've seen more so the prosecution, they're out of touch. And when I say out of touch, it's like there might be some gang connotations or language, and they're not up to speed with the language. So someone said something and they're reading it out, but it's totally wrong to what it actually means.
Yeah.
And you sit there and they've missed the trick, because if they would have understood what that word meant, or
Mm,
I'll give you an example. I was at the Old Bailey watching a murder case recently, and one of the defendants was accused of getting out, and it's called G check when you're like, where are you from? And the way that it was presented in court by the prosecution was that the G check happened halfway through the conversation, and then outside, one of the defense family members said to their legal team, "No, a G check cannot happen in the middle. It has to happen as soon as you meet someone. Like, where are you from? You don't then start talking to them, then randomly say where you're from,
Mm,
and then the stabbing or shooting happens." And I looked at that and I said, this is the second or third time that I've sat in on a case where the prosecution is not up to speed with uh, the behaviors of young people or even the language, and
mm,
they've missed what is actually going on, and then gone on to another point. And I sat there throughout the court proceedings thinking, you've just missed the whole point. And
mm.
if you would have just caught on to that point, the defense would not have had a leg to stand on. And the defense sat there thinking, please don't let him realize what's going on.
Mm.
Have you ever had a case like that where you've seen the prosecution totally miss something? You think, yeah, I'm not going to say a word.
Yeah, because a lot of these cases now center around social media and what's written in messages, Snapchat messages, and sometimes if you misunderstand what is being said, the interpretation of it can be really important. The implication of what's meant can be really important, and sometimes you even have police officers who claim to be, gang experts or experts in street language, and even they get it wrong.
Yeah.
So it's really important. I mean, I've been in cases where that's happened, many cases, and you sort of, as a defense lawyer, you sort of make sure that you understand what that language means and how it impacts your case. Whereas I think sometimes prosecution counsel are a bit aloof. They don't know what it means, or ascribe the wrong meaning to something in order to try and prove their case. Sometimes it works, sometimes to the detriment of the defendant, because there's a misconstrue or a misunderstanding of what a message actually means, which can have really serious implications.
Yeah, what one of the things that I've seen recently, and both here and America, is the cell site where we're not in 5G area. I think when we end up with 5G, a lot of defendants are going to have serious problems because once we end up with 5G, it would be able to pinpoint more accurately than what we're dealing with now, where you might have a phone mask just being able to tell you that you're in the area or 2 or 3 streets away.
Mm.
With the input of 5G, it might be able to locate you directly to a house or a residence. So I think that the minute we end up with this 5G and also the CCTV with more facial recognition, uh, I heard about a case earlier today. I don't know if you've ever had one of these on your case, where they've got a new technique now. I've seen it used in American cases where they record the suspect once they're in custody, how they walk, and then go and match that with an expert. I don't know the name of the expert that they use to see if the person on the CCTV that carried out, whether it's a shooting, a murder, whatever, walks a similar way to the person as they've got them in custody. I only heard about that today. I didn't know that they're doing that in the UK now. I forgot the name of what they described it as, but they actually check in your body mass and the way you walk.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there are all sorts of different techniques now which they use, not just in terms of facial recognition, but you have gait recognition, i.e., the gait of your walk. If
Yeah.
you walk a particular limp or something distinctive about you, which they can then match to a piece of CCTV evidence to suggest that that is you, then that evidence now is entering the courtroom as being admissible evidence given by an expert. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the first case I saw that in was the Hatton Garden heist,
Mm,
where the last person that they were looking for had a distinctive walk, and they then went off and matched it to the person that they later arrested.
yeah.
So for me, you're in the defense game. I'm trying to do the prevention game to prevent them even coming to you. And sometimes I work so hard, I'm wondering if it was in America, call it aiding and abetting, where you tell them go in the police station, say no comment, shut your mouth till your lawyer gets there, no matter how badly you want to answer any question, be quiet. I say to my clients that I work with now, committing crime is not going to work. There's CCTV everywhere. Your phone is a CCTV. Your phone listens to your conversation. Your phone picks up all the texts, the phone calls, the all of that stuff. So if you get a case and it's just a mess, as you said, you would advise them to just just give a defense and try and get them a lenient sentence. How is it when you're trying to explain that to a client that some might have special needs, but some are just believing that you're meant to get them out?
Yeah, I mean, it's a difficult balancing exercise. Some people are convinced of their own innocence because they genuinely are innocent, and that's fine. Then there are some people who, as you say, have various learning difficulties and
Yeah.
issues which you have to overcome. And there are some people who are just chances. They just fancy their chances against the criminal justice system, and no matter how much you advise them, they think that they can beat the system, if you like. And they think that they've got a good defense lawyer who can run all these points and arguments for them. But ultimately, the jury decide on a case. Sometimes you get lucky as a defendant where you have done something and you get off, as they say. That's where the term "get" comes from. You get off. We're
Yeah.
not in the business of trying to get people off. We're in the business of representing people and letting the system prove that whatever they're accused of, they did it. But sometimes people do get off, but invariably those same people don't learn a lesson, and you see them again.
Yeah. So if you had one bit of advice now, because I saw your video, and as I said, because of your video, it touched me, and I needed you on. With all the knowledge and as we spoke about cell sites, body masking, mapping, phones, the social media, the systems. I forgot the Ripper system that the police used to bring back all your texts that you think you've deleted and the numbers. What would your advice be, knowing the technology that you, as a defense barrister, is having to go up against to get people off? What would you actually say to someone watching this tonight that think that they're the most advanced criminal in the UK right now? What advice would you give them?
There's no such thing as the perfect crime. And when you engage in certain activities, especially at the kind of level that we're dealing with, you better believe that the state and its resources are well equipped to detect crime. You watch a lot of stuff on the news where you say there are not enough police on the street. But when it comes to serious crime, they have a lot of resources enabled to detect crime. And you'd be surprised, as Gwenton has said, how much information your mobile phone gives out, and the CCTV. Um, I've been doing this job a long time, and all I know is that by the time the cases come to court for a lot of the most serious cases that I deal with, the police have done their homework. They've got the resources to do that homework, and it's for the defense lawyer to challenge certain things, but they've gone through a lot of trouble to put that
Yeah.
evidence together.
So that's a ending note, and it might sound as a downer, but what we're trying to say is you'll get represented, but try and stay at the core.
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you for being on the show today. And end on that note with the hay fever. So for for me, I would say to anyone watching this show, please, there's no perfect crime. If you could prevent it, try and, even if you're sitting on your money now, try and change your life before it's too late. The worst thing is trying to overrun your luck and ending up in prison. We only got one life. If we get to 72 years, we're lucky. And most of us have already seen more summers behind us than we might have in front of us. So please, yeah, you've heard here from a veteran barrister of over 3 decades telling you it doesn't make sense. Stephen, I want to thank you again for coming on and sharing your time and your knowledge. And hopefully we could save a life, because we're happy to defend and help people out, but we're trying to preserve and save life. Yeah.
100%. Thanks, Quentin.
Thank you again. Love and blessings. And what we'll do, we'll put all the contact details at the end if someone wants to get in contact with you to deal with a case or something along those lines. Yeah.
No problem. Thanks, Quentin.
Thank you a lot.
Bye.
Bye bye.